All right, boys, blue blood heat check, that time of the day, that time of the week. And let's start with Michigan. I think somebody brought it up the other day. We don't talk about Michigan a lot. We should probably talk about the Wolverines and the defending national champions. They are currently ranked number 40 right now. And you think about Michigan and what they traditionally have done on the recruiting trail under Jim Harbaugh. Good, with an ability to get to great. We'll see what that looks like under Sharon Moore. Past three finishes, number 19, number 17, number 9, they don't jump out to you, but this is the best player development program in the country. I think right up there, you could argue, with any other program, Georgia, Alabama as well. The guys at the top of the board, Tom, and we'll start with you. A couple names: Andrew Babalola, JaDon Blair, Jordan Davison. Help me out with this name. Avery, last name?
Gach.
Avery Gach, thank you. And then Michael Carroll. It's a lot of beef there. 4 to the 5 of those guys in the top 247. Let's start with Babs. Andrew Babalola, the number 15 player ranked overall, 5-star, number 3 offensive tackle. The standout out of Kansas, basketball background, one of my favorite guys in the entire cycle. We know what Michigan can do on the offensive line in terms of player development. Where do they stand with Andrew Babalola?
Michigan is very much a threat to get this one done. It's not going to be easy, though. Alabama also in play. He's actually going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. A&M, Stanford, USC, also contenders. Going to take visits to see all 3 in the near future. And keep an eye on Oklahoma. The Sooners have an official visit locked in June. Decision is not expected until right before the start of his senior season. But talking to Michigan, people around him, around the program, the interest in the Wolverines is very real. He's obviously an elite talent, top of the board guy in Michigan. Sharon Moore, the rest of the staff, they're doing a really good job. So, Michigan fans should keep an eye on him.
Is he? I've gotten the impression more of a high academic kind of fit, right? Like this kind of feels like a Michigan recruitment once you kind of get into the weeds and dig in on Andrew Babalola a little bit. There's going to be some programs that maybe stand out a little bit more because of that.
Absolutely. Extremely impressive kid. Great to deal with. Every single coaching staff that I've spoken with about him raves about him. Michigan absolutely loves him as a fit. So, you nailed that one.
Drew, let's talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying he's a Michigan man? Is that the vibe I'm getting?
Well, I'm saying there is that's a very real thing, right? And there's some players and some individuals that just kind of gravitate to the program, and it's a powerful place with a lot to sell. Not only the championship history and what they've done recently, but over time, one of the most winningest programs in college football. And then you think about Sharon Moore. There's obviously a huge effort in terms of what Michigan is trying to do to get to the top of the NIL game as well. That is something that they are very cognizant of. They brought in Sean McGee, who used to be with the program as really the associate AD, now general manager, whatever you want to call it, was the chief of staff with the Chicago Bears. Extremely smart. Honestly, one of the sharpest individuals I've ever been around in the game of football. So he's going to be there to head up everything when it comes to NIL, which gives me an extreme amount of confidence in Michigan going forward, especially with a rookie head coach in Sharon Moore. But Drew, from a football fit with Babalola, this is one of those guys, I think, from a scouting standpoint, you want to see him in the best position to succeed because the talent is just so rich. And what I mean by that, nutritional, strength conditioning, player development, all that is going to be so important for Andrew Babalola to be successful at the next level. What would you think of a Babalola Michigan fit?
Well, I think you stole my notes because this I had written down as a question for you. Is there a better potential marriage or fit out there for Babalola? He's raw. He's going to need time. He's going to need seasoning. He's going to need coaching. And you think about him potentially being at Michigan, which has continued year over year to really refortify that offensive line. And Jim Harbaugh had some comments recently. I think it was at one of the NFL media days or that meeting they had down in Florida about, hey, the team starts in the trenches. It starts up front. Michigan is taking 5-6 offensive linemen every year. So for Babalola, that's a program where he can go and he can sit. He can learn for a year or two. He's not thrust into action. So I think Michigan would make a ton of sense if his goal is, okay, I want to be a first-round pick. I have that type of ceiling. I want to ensure I get coached up. I think Michigan makes a ton of sense because if some of those other programs that have been linked to him, the expectation is when you get, a premium talent like that, you're going to play, right? You're going to play early and you're going to take your lumps. Look at Caden Proctor at Alabama, Francis Mawanoa down at Miami. We've seen it, the top ranked tackles, it's blessing by fire when it comes to them. And I think Babalola is a guy that's probably going to need some time to sit a little bit.
Michigan has probably had one of the most consistent offensive line units year over year. Sharon Moore, a big part of that. And I want to be very careful about what I'm about to say. You think about the top end talent. I feel like Michigan has had very good players littered within the top 247 or maybe outside of the top 247. But when you think about the type of talent that Andrew Babalola is and that he presents to a guy like Sharon Moore, I'm trying to think of the last time that they had somebody like that, a guy that has that true day one potential when they can put it all together. So love that potential fit there.
Can I shoot in here?
Of course.
Look at Lugard Etapaye, who they took last year as an edge rusher. A guy maybe a little bit higher ceiling that Michigan's got in the past. Now the floor is probably a little bit lower than their normal edge rusher takes, but it would be the same thing if Babalola ends up at Michigan. They get really good football players, really, really good football players, and they squeeze the most out of them. But this, to me, Babalola, or as you call him, Babs, love that nickname. You're getting something that maybe you can't develop in-house. He's got that extra 10%. That's what's intriguing to me about this potential, destination for him.
All right, Michigan fans, you can obviously tell we were big fans of Andrew Babalola. We'll see what happens with him. It sounds like a decision is nowhere near at this time, and that will continue to play out. Tom, I alluded to a couple other names on the board: JaDon Blair, Jordan Davison, Avery Gach. Unbelievable. And Michael Carroll. Any of these names stand out to you just in terms of where they are with Michigan right now?
Honestly, they all do, because I'm kind of checking around looking for the top targets. I mean, these were some, if not, and there's more to be named. But JaDon Blair is a guy that Notre Dame. I'm sorry, I was going to say something about Notre Dame. Notre Dame Michigan battle for JaDon Blair. Penn State, South Carolina, Florida State also in play. But man, when you talk to people close to this one, they're 100% thinking it's Notre Dame or Michigan. Notre Dame led for a while, in my opinion, at least, with Chris O'Leary being there, but he left for the NFL. And Mike Mickens is picking things up there. But and then I think most people just assume Penn State was the likely landing spot. But Blair has a ton of interest in Michigan. He was just there on campus for a recent visit, and he's going to return. He's got official visits lined up for Virginia. And again, there's a lot: Virginia Tech, Louisville, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Michigan. And I think he wraps it up with Florida State and Penn State after that. So long way to go with this process. It's not going to be done anytime soon. But when you're talking to people, when you're getting around him, a lot of people think it's going to be Notre Dame or Michigan, but I think Michigan's a school not being talked enough as it pertains to Blair, a guy that, the poor man's, people want to call him Kyle Hamilton. I feel like anybody above 6'3" is initially like, oh, that's Kyle Hamilton, which I think is kind of silly. But yeah, he's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, Drew, do you have a take on this kid? 6'4", long, safety, the Kyle Hamilton comparison. You can understand why, just from like what Tom said, from a frame standpoint. You don't see a lot of guys with that size playing on the back end in the secondary. What do you think about JaDon Blair?
He's just a back seven defender. I think you take him and figure it out later, right? He has tested well. I think kind of my big question mark with him is, all right, can he come to balance, make tackles in the open field for a guy that size? Kind of similar in some ways. So I'm going to get away from the Kyle Hamilton comp. What about like James Williams at Miami? Another oversized safety. It seems like everyone wants to push him forward towards the line of scrimmage. That's a kid that I think he worked out with the linebackers at the NFL scouting combine. So, he is something, I don't think it's a sure thing, but I like the profile. He punches it on the hardwood. And I think, all right, this kid at Michigan, given what you just said on the tail end of on the front end of the segment, player development, they're going to get the most out of him.
Yeah. Speaking of the profile, 6'4", 180 pounds, got a 6'6" wingspan. He's mid 4.6s. That was all in April of 2023, right? So you got to account for what he's put together over the last year and see where he looks like physically. The thing that kind of jumped out to me on tape, he's a lot more of a run defender than he is a guy that you really kind of see in man to man or coverage playing the deep part of the field. And for a guy with that frame at 6'4", 180, it's typically what you see on the opposite end. I think he can obviously get to over 200 pounds. We talked about that 6'6" wingspan. But if I had one question mark on him, it would be, okay, what does this guy kind of look like in coverage? Saw him at the Combine, South Carolina last year. I think a little bit lost in space at times. All things you can kind of develop. I kind of think back to a guy that played his ball at Michigan and hit the portal, and now at Alabama, like Keon Sabb, right? They did some good things with him, putting him in good position. Certainly a guy that I thought was more well-versed playing downhill than he was with his back to the quarterback. I kind of see the same thing there with JaDon Blair. Tom, another name that's kind of heating up, a national prospect, one of the best running backs in the country from modern day in California. What can you tell us about Jordan Davis?
He is a big priority for new running backs coach Tony Alford. It's really Jordan Davison and Marquise Davis as the top running back targets for Alford in Michigan. If it's up to him, they would both eventually pick the Wolverines. But Texas is also very much in play. Ohio State as well. He just visited Alabama. They're pushing hard, but keep an eye on Michigan. I think that a lot of people would consider that an upset, but I actually think they can get that one done. I think they're doing a really good job there. But just to mention a couple others that you had brought up, Avery Gach, offensive lineman. I think that's a Midwest battle between Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State. I believe he's a Michigan State legacy, but I actually think it's going to come down to Michigan versus Ohio State. I think Michigan leads heading into a visit this weekend, but he's also going to see Ohio State and Michigan State. It's kind of too close to really predict that one. I think there is a crystal ball prediction in for Michigan. At last I looked. Actually, maybe Ohio State. I might be backwards, but I think it's Michigan. And then offensive lineman Michael Carroll out of Pennsylvania. Michigan's doing an outstanding job there. Penn State is also in play. Alabama and Georgia are definitely making it interesting. But Michigan's going to host him in June for an official visit. So they have a really good opportunity to get that one done as well. In fact, I probably would say that Michigan's the leader for Carroll right now.
Drew, have you watched this Michael Carroll kid?
I have not.
I am a huge fan. Number 29 IOL, two-way snaps, reminds me a lot of AJ Dennis, who signed with Illinois last year. Wrestling background as well, strong at the point of attack, can climb up to the second level. I get excited thinking about Babalola and Michael Carroll potentially working together, same side of the line of scrimmage. Michael Carroll named to asterisk, and certainly a guy that we'll revisit in the future.